We're streaming. We'll wait. Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Tetrick, and I am from the U.S. Embassy here in Kyiv. It is a pleasure to be with you here tonight. I think we have a very interesting and fascinating speaker and a great topic that's of very important relevance to Ukraine today, unfortunately. So I will not make you listen to me for very long because you did not come here to hear me speak. But I am very happy to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, who is here to talk about his book, and you'll have a chance to listen to him and hear more about his wonderful ideas and his experience. So please come on up.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
It has been my great honor these last 2 days to present to the men and women of Ukraine. I want to recognize my publisher, Oli. He had me doing 3 engagements yesterday and 3 today. We got up at 2 this morning from Lviv, and we drove to here, and we've been presenting. Have been wonderfully received. I have a son who just retired after 27 years, special ops, 10 combat deployments, 3 Bronze Stars. I have a grandson who will now be going on his first deployment to the combat zone this fall. My war was a Cold War. I came in 1974, got out in 1997. And my son and my grandson and men and women in this fight today, they will see more in a week than I would have seen in my whole career. And they are magnificent. And the nation of Ukraine has astounded and inspired the world on their dedication to freedom and liberty. I have a few things I think could be of service to you. And we'll go ahead and pull up to that first slide, if we could, please. This is a interview of hundreds of law enforcement officers immediately after they were in combat, over 141. And it was very detailed interviews, one-on-one by people they trusted and knew. And I just want you to notice that 85% experienced what we call auditory exclusion. The shots were muted, not quiet. Anybody here ever been a hunter? Hunters, be proud. You're among friends, yeah? You ever notice something? You fire your hunting rifle one time at the range without hearing protection, and your ears will ring for the rest of the day. You go to shoot a deer. Boom. People a kilometer away hear the shot. Hunter, what do you hear? Nothing. And your ears don't ring. Now, you are still getting hearing loss. The shutout is within the nervous system. The ear is still being hammered. Now, wear hearing protection. Oh, you'd be a deaf old geezer like me, and it's a pain in the rear. Yeah? But 85% experience that auditory exclusion. Now, I believe I've interviewed more people who have been in combat than anyone in human history. I was a West Point psychology professor. I interviewed hundreds of people, of Vietnam veterans, World War II veterans, starting in the 1980s, for my book on killing. I retired from the Army in 1997. I'm a police officer, and I'm also one of our nation's leading trainers of law enforcement. I'm the only person ever to be certified to train law enforcement in all 50 states. I've been on the road for the last 26 years, a couple of 100 days a year, training our military, hundreds of units, no exaggeration, and training law enforcement. And every day somebody comes up and says, this is what it was like for me. In 23 years of war and the law enforcement, every day, this constant reinforcing information loop. And you got to ask yourself, when we tell people about this, they're terribly relieved that it was normal. It was like that for me, but nobody told me about it. How could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not let people know what every hunter knows, that the shots get muted? Now, 16% had intensified sounds. And even I came up through the ranks. I was a paratrooper in 1974, a buck sergeant, OCS graduate, and then I taught at West Point. And even an old buck sergeant from Arkansas can figure out that adds up to 101%. Because sometimes both happens. And the ones that are a little bit different have an awful lot to teach us. And anytime both auditory exclusion and intensified sound happen, it always went like this. You're caught by surprise in an ambush. Boom, boom, boom. Shots overwhelming. You start shooting back, and the shots get muted. The body is focusing intensely on the sense it needs most for survival. When you start shooting, the eyes dial in, the ears dial out, the shots get muted. Now, 80% were conscious of tunnel vision. People talk about looking through a toilet paper tube. 80% were conscious. I believe the actual number is probably much higher. When we do our force-on-force engagements, if we're not videotaping it, we really are losing the majority of the learning opportunity. And people look, now these are force-on-force training engagements. You hold a real gun in your hand, you pull the trigger, it's a flash and bang, but what leaves the barrel is a plastic marking capsule. And when it hits, it hurts. And most people, when they do it the first time, the body treats it like it's real. And so we have them look at the videotape. They say, oh, that was right in front of me. I never saw it. That's tunnel vision. And they weren't even aware of it. Now, we've got this concept of autopilot. You do what you do without conscious thought. You do not rise to the challenge. You sink to the level of your training. Very often we talk about police officers. They say the gun just appeared in my hand. They were not conscious of drawing. And there are many other dynamics on that. But we've got this concept also of slow motion time. I have had hundreds of people tell me they can see the bullet in combat. Some of you have done paintball or airsoft, and you've been able to kind of track the bullet with your eyes. It's like that. And it absolutely astounds people that these things are happening. Now, some of we really hit the high ground. Half of all trained, seasoned police officers had memory gaps. They just flat had gaps in the memory, blackouts. After a couple of nights sleep, sometimes that comes back, sometimes it never comes back, and that's okay. But really, we cut to the chase, 22%, a little over 1 out of 5, just flat remembered something that did not happen. The memory distortions. Remember something that did not happen. What's another word for that? Hallucination, lies. So, folks, in the state of Texas, it's the law. The police officer has the right to see every video before they write their formal written statement. You have tunnel vision, things right in front of you didn't see. You have memory gaps. You have memory distortions. Then you put that down on paper, and what do they say? The world is going to look at that videotape in slow motion time over and over again. You're going to say you lied. Why did you say this happened when it didn't happen? So when we understand these dynamics, it is amazing how many times people say, let me tell you about memory distortions. And they give case studies, but one major one, a little over 15 years ago, we had a United States Navy SEAL, a Vietnam veteran, who said, I have to confess, after all these years, I've got to get it off my chest. He said, on this one mission, we went into the hut and we murdered the civilians. And it didn't happen. We know it didn't happen. It wasn't possible. The timeline wasn't possible. Everybody else said, no, that didn't happen. It was physically impossible for it to have happened. Thank goodness we could verify that. Oh, why would one person say that years later? Well, that's memory distortions. Now, what we got to do is this. After combat, it is really essential to do a after-action review. Now, those have been trained by Western forces, British, Canadian, US. We know the majority of the learning in a training event happens afterwards in the AAR, the after-action review. So how much more so must we capture the lessons learned in a real-life situation? But now we also fill in the memory gaps and we sort out the memory distortions. And the US Armed Forces, our sergeants are taught to do an AAR. It's a very simple process. Ideally, it's done at the squad level. Once you get beyond that, it gets difficult to get everybody a chance to speak. Everybody talks. This is what I did. Oh, this is what I did. Oh, that's what happened. This is what we did right. This is what we did wrong. This is how we can do a better job next time. But we're also filling in those memory gaps. No, man, that didn't happen. Are you sure? Yes. And I've had people who, the most bizarre memories. And they said, if I didn't know those memory distortions could happen, I would have spent the rest of my life thinking they all conspired to lie to me about some goofy little aspect of what happened. So we understand the debriefing. We understand the need to fill in the gaps. I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about sympathetic nervous system arousal, how you re-experience the event. And one of the tools that we have to control that is a big drink of water. We have something in the United States we call CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management. They teach the debriefing mechanism worldwide. I'm part of their faculty at their international conference in Baltimore most years. And the idea of sitting and doing a debriefing after a critical event is normal. But now we put that bottle of water in front of everybody. And the minute they become emotional, the minute they begin to re-experience the event, we stop, take a big swig of water, and regain control. So set aside the fact that somebody's trying to kill you. Set aside the fact that you're in combat. If you were just sitting here right now, and boom, auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, blackouts, hallucinations, that would meet every definition of a psychotic episode. Just those things by themselves would scare the daylights out of you. And the solution is straightforward: to let everybody know ahead of time that these are the things that can happen. And across 26 years on the road, presenting this information, which is all in the book on combat, it is astounding how many people come up and said, now I understand. Why didn't I know this ahead of time? Why weren't we told this before? All right, so the dynamics of crazy things in combat, we kind of expect. But when crazy things happen a week later, a month later, a year later, it can scare the daylights out of us unless we've been warned. So during a traumatic event, there is sympathetic nervous system arousal. The fight or flight mechanism kicks in, and a neural network is established. It's called one trial learning. Whenever there's fear and pain associated with learning, a powerful network of neurons, a neural network is established. When you were a kid, how many times did you have to touch a hot stove? Hot stove, how many times? Just once. Just once. And a powerful neural network was established. Well, how much more so could this neural pathway be established from combat? A soldier told me he'd been trained by me. He'd read the book. He was prepared. He said, I came home from a combat tour in I believe it was Afghanistan. He said, I've been home for just a day, and I'm with my little 3-year-old boy, and somebody throws a firecracker. Boom! So I hit the dirt without conscious thought. And look up here, here's my little boy. Look, when I was that big. And I said, those are called combat reflexes. It kept Daddy alive in combat. And it'd take a while for that to go away. Now that is a very healthy response. But I had a Arkansas State Trooper, first gunfight. Bad guy's down, he's alive. Happy ending of the story. He said, a week after my first gunfight, I'm sitting in the bleachers with my wife watching our daughter at a swim meet. What do you suppose pushed his button? He said, the starter's pistol went off when I didn't expect it. Boom. My heart's pounding. I'm gasping for air. I'm drenched with sweat. His wife thought he's having a heart attack. He didn't know what was happening. And here's the key. Re-experiencing the event is not post-traumatic stress disorder. It's normal. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. Imagine my state trooper. Imagine if he said, I can never go to another swim meet. I can't qualify with my weapon. I hate loud noises. I can't go to movies. You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. You got to separate the memory from the emotions. Now, one of the tools we have is a breathing exercise that I teach in On Combat. And I have many, many letters and emails from people about how the book worked for them. And the breathing exercise is used by an enormous number of people effectively, and they said saved their lives. But we've got another technique now in recent years. And when that sympathetic nervous system fight or flight mechanism kicks in, one of the best tools to get it under control is a big drink of water. And we take that big drink of water, and it sends a powerful message to the body that says, I'm safe. Now, imagine a deer's being chased by a wolf. Can you stop and get a drink? I can't get a drink. I'm being chased by a wolf. The fact that you stop, take that drink, you swallow, hits the stomach, it truly can pull you from fight or flight to rest and digest, from sympathetic to parasympathetic mechanisms. So the swig of water is one trick to separate the memory from the emotions, but we have many, many other tricks, many other tools to do that. I had the honor last year to train an entire Air Force base. We had the base theater packed full, caught on camera, piped out throughout the base, and it was their mental health week. And the psychiatrist, who is the commander of their mental health unit, talked to the whole base before I spoke. And he said, everybody listen to me. He said, we're really, really good at treating PTSD. But you got to let us know. How can you help other people if you can't help yourself? Now, one of the tools that we use is EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, reprogramming, and you're following a visual stimulus while you talk about and think about the incident. And through the process of following that visual stimulus, the midbrain, the autonomic nervous system is busy. And you're able to talk about the event without the memory coming, without the emotions coming along with it. And very often, just one or two iterations of EMDR can separate the memory from the emotion. If that doesn't work, there's other tricks that we use. Just understand this. There's value in explaining to people why it works and how it works. We're getting that midbrain, that autonomic nervous system is busy so that you can talk about it without re-experiencing the event. So there's two just critical things that people have to know before they're going to combat. They've got to know about all of this, and they've got to know when they re-experience the event, it's normal, and not to be frightened by it, but to understand there are things we can do to separate the memory from the emotion. Now, remember the soldier who told his little boy that was combat reflexes? It kept daddy alive in combat, and take a while for that to go away? That is a very healthy response. The DSM, the Bible of Psychiatry and Psychology, says about PTSD that it has to last at least a month before we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. You can have every single one of the symptoms of PTSD, and it's normal. It's only when it lasts at least a month, we say, okay, now we have something abnormal, and we need to work on this, and we can. To recognize that dynamic, one other quick thing I need you to understand, it's beginning to bubble up after 23 years of war. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. The video games, the social media, the binge watching movies and TV shows. So throughout human history, when the soldiers had nothing to do, and if they needed to sleep, they went to sleep. But now they sit and play video games and they watch movies instead of getting the sleep that they need. I had a command sergeant major tell me, it was a unit that was deploying to Iraq. The sergeant major had been with the unit on a previous deployment. He told me that the battalion was in a barracks environment at night, with power, television, and video games, but combat patrols during the day. And he said, it's lights out. You must be in your bed at 10 o'clock, 2200 every night. He said, if I catch you up after lights out, playing video games, I will take your video games. He said, these are good soldiers. They wouldn't disobey an order. But he said, a week later, I had a closet overflowing with video games. They're so seductive. They're so addictive. And they will try to escape with the game, escape with the movie, instead of getting the sleep they need. Now, just recently, the Veterans Administration, the VA, released some research. And if you are sleep deprived when the traumatic event occurs, if you've been up for 24 hours, that sleep deprivation is putting enormous stress on your body. If a traumatic event happens while you're sleep deprived, you are 5 times more likely to get PTSD, 6 times more likely to have suicidal ideation, 9 times more likely to be depressed. So this sleep deprivation is a critical piece of the equation. We recently had a artillery battalion in Syria. They fired a U.S. battalion. They fired a lot of fire missions. They went home, and they've had tremendous incidents of PTSD, and suicide, and depression. They say, oh, it's all those fire missions. Well, no. In World War I and World War II, the artillery fired for years. No exaggeration, years. And they were just fine. The new factor is not firing artillery. It was they went to their room and they played video games and they watched TV instead of getting the sleep that they needed. So we're slamming into this. Now, I want you to do your own research. I want you to do an online search for sleep deprivation and suicide. Sleep deprivation is a major factor in suicide. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of suicide. It is one of the major killers of adults and teenagers. And teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-old, teenage girls' suicide rate in America has tripled in the last decade. Now, alcohol and suicide have always been closely related. Taking your own life is not a natural act. Every living organism has a powerful drive towards self-preservation. To intentionally take your own life, you have to have profoundly impaired judgment. Alcohol creates impaired judgment. You make a bad decision, never the chance to rethink it. But you're only drunk for a little while. Sleep deprivation goes on and on and on and on. And the teenage girls are not getting drunk, but they're sleep deprived. And it just gets worse and worse. So do your own search on sleep deprivation and suicide and look at the data. In America, we lose more police officers to suicide than every other line of duty death put together. And we're beginning to realize the major factor is sleep deprivation. One of the best meta-studies on suicide, not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. Look, we can't do much about your relationships. We can't do much about your finances, but we can get you a good night's sleep right now. And so this is something to aware of. Worldwide, decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down. Airbags, seatbelts, medical technology. Now, for the last decade, worldwide, traffic deaths have exploded. What is the new factor worldwide? The sleep deprivation. And again, the number 2 killer of our cops is traffic deaths. And if we gave a dang about suicide, if we gave a dang about traffic deaths, the first thing we'd look at is sleep management. And this is a discipline issue. This is a training issue. This is a leadership issue. I commend your attention a book called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. And all these things I'm telling you are in the book. You don't even have to buy the book. Look at Why We Sleep, Dr. Matthew Walker online. And on his website, he's got all the latest research reaffirming the link between sleep deprivation and suicide, the link between sleep deprivation and traffic deaths, and a huge link between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's and dementia. And folks, lack of deep cycle sleep is the single greatest predictor of Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's most common form of dementia. And again, look at the research yourself. We can deal with this, but it's a leadership issue and it's an information issue. And once again, we got to inform people and inform leaders. And they say, well, I can't sleep. There's artillery all the time, so I'll just play video games. Well, I can give you hundreds of case studies across history where soldiers have learned to sleep while artillery is firing. But we could use some technology and get noise-canceling headphones and tune it out. The single most important nugget I can give you on sleep hygiene is simply this. We are designed to sleep in total darkness. Major study in the sleep lab. Totally dark room. The bathroom light is on and the door is shut. The light coming under the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin that you need to sleep. Melatonin is a hormone the body creates for us to sleep. It creates in the dark. If you're not in total darkness, the body is severely hampered in producing melatonin. So one answer is a sleep mask. And across the U.S. Armed Forces, we're passing out these sleep masks. But they're the cheap kind. Spend $20 and get a good one. On Amazon, the top sleep mask has got over 85,000 5-star reviews on Amazon.com for a sleep mask. 85,000 the last time I checked. But that's how people feel when they start using this thing. And these are nuggets we can apply right now. Now, another major dynamic is caffeine abuse. And the half-life of caffeine in our body is 5 hours. That means the caffeine you took at 5 p.m. at dinner is still at half strength when you go to bed at 10 p.m. And it's making you have bad quality sleep. You might be able to sleep, but you're not getting deep cycle sleep. And lack of deep cycle sleep is a key factor in pain because the muscles and tendons don't fully relax. And it's a key factor in Alzheimer's. So just understand, this is an area where we can make some difference right now to save lives and touch lives. And let me show you one last thing, and then we'll open up to a few questions. And then I'll tie it up with a piece if I may. But can we turn to that photograph at the end? No, not that guy. That guy. This is the single most remarkable case I've ever seen. This is a young police officer on 9/11 coming down from the World Trade Center. Now, her face is beet red. That's called vasodilation. We've all seen that. The body is screaming for oxygen. Every blood vessel is wide open, pumping the oxygen where it needs to go. His face is bone white. That's called vasoconstriction. Now, on the other side of the head, there's a pretty bad cut. He's been burned. He's on his second trip down for the World Trade Center and the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Now, I have spent a lifetime studying the color images of frightened human beings. And I have never seen such a powerful example of vasodilation, that's her, and vasoconstriction, that's him, side by side. Their heart rate could be exactly the same. The impact on their body is exactly the opposite. His body has shut down the blood flow to the outer layer of the body. The arteries and the body core can be holding up to twice as much blood. What happened to your blood pressure? Skyrockets. Just about any time you see stress-induced blood pressure increase, it's the early stages of vasoconstriction. Now, his body can suck up enormous trauma. As long as you don't hit the artery, as long as you don't puncture the body core, he won't bleed out in the heat of battle. Does that sound like a survival mechanism? But what's the price we pay for that? Oh, the muscles aren't getting blood. First, you lose fine motor control. Then you lose complex motor control. And you've got some pretty catastrophic shutdown of logical processes. Now, the point I want to make with this one is this vasoconstriction is sometimes called the mask of fear, the white across the eyes. But it's a funny thing about fear. It's a funny thing about courage. You can act happy, not really be happy. You can act sad, not really be sad. But if you act brave, you are brave. And this is a very brave young man. What makes him different from her? What's he going to do that she's not? He's going back. He's been cut. He's been burned. He's exhausted. People tried to stop him from going. But like a mother who races in a burning building to save a beloved child, Christopher Amoroso, it's his name, Christopher Amoroso will go back into the World Trade Center a third time for just the remote chance of saving one more life. The building will fall, and he will not come home to his wife and baby tonight. He will never come home again. So why does one person go toward the danger again and again while thousands are running away? Number one, that's what he's trained to do. And our training and the habit of courage, the habit of going toward the danger, the habit of accepting the responsibility for lives. But number two, in nature, the one place where the powerful instinct to self-preservation is canceled out across many different species, can be seen in a mama critter across many different species, a mama who will die for what? Her babies. In combat, we know if we throw strangers in the front lines together, men and women who don't know each other, don't care about each other, as soon as it's dark, as soon as people are dying, they're out of there. But you put together a band of brothers and sisters, men and women who know and trust one another, they'll fight long and hard. Why? For each other. Audie Murphy was the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Audie Murphy was asked one time why he did it. His answer was very simple. They were killing my friends. They were killing my friends. All this research revolves around one word: love. The mama critter loves her babies more than life itself. Audie Murphy loved his fellow soldiers more than life itself. And the Bible says, greater love has no one than this. They lay down their life for their friends. But there are many ways to lay down your life. We're not all called to die in some desperate incident, but we are all called to serve. And sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. And the nation of Ukraine has personified the courage, the sacrifice, the dedication, the love that has inspired the world. And it is one of the great honors of my life to be here and to be of service, for my books to be of service to the magnificent men and women. And my sincere thanks to the embassy has helped to make this possible, and to my publisher. So I would like to take just a few minutes and open the door for some questions, and then just a little wrap up for myself, and we'll stay around as long as you need. Like I said, we got up at 2 this morning. That's no big deal, right? Because I'll catch up tonight, right? I do practice what I preach, truly do. Questions? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for this fascinating lecture. And I have recently ran a conference at Ukrainian diplomatic directorate for several topics, but one of them was PTSD. And in fact, it's not given enough attention at the moment in Ukraine. And one issue is how to combat its spread, because it's believed that it may be millions of people currently at least under threat, or maybe actually having PTSD. And one thought that came from your lecture is, can we say that positive experience and experience of helping others can be this maybe in single major factor? And is there any statistics, any research showing that in, I don't know, in the units, in the regiments that have this spirit, PTSD rates may be lower?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have seen among elite units that the post-traumatic stress disorder can be significantly lower. Now, I'll tell you one thing that's very important. Ukraine is doing something pretty good. In the United States, ever since World War I, we drafted 18-year-old kids, and we sent them into the fight. And that was okay. I was one of those 18-year-old kids in the 82nd Airborne, but you're still a child at 18. You are so unformed in so many ways. Ukraine is doing something pretty wise by taking mature individuals and putting them in this situation. Again, we don't want to create an expectation that problems will occur, but we can understand some of the things we can do well. And maturity and life experience and training are a critical piece of the equation. Physical fitness, a piece of the equation. Remember, if your body is already under stress and that traumatic event happens, those stressors can amplify each other. So training is a key component, and I'll give you an angle on this. When Canada started in the war in Afghanistan. It was Canada's first shooting war since Korea. And they tried to make sure they did everything they could for the first regiment that deployed, including bringing me to train the troops. And they brought the first regiment home from Afghanistan. And one regimental commander said, we asked the lads, okay, what worked? And they said, Grossman. He told us what would happen to our mind and body. He told us what to do about it. And they've just kind of repeated that process. And I had the privilege across 20 years to train a large portion of the Canadian Armed Forces. And many of the things I teach, they picked up and ran with. We have this sense of the military as being a monolithic entity, but it's not. This division does that, and that post does this. And a new general here, and everything changes, and we start all over again. But there is a steady development of the body of human knowledge and a steady development of our ability to prepare people for the stressors they're facing. Now, the British study of their troops in Afghanistan, 5% contracted PTSD. Now, even when we look at the ones who were only in close combat, it never gets over 7%. The Dutch studied their troops in Afghanistan, 5%. Now, in America, we are very generous to our veterans. We give them disability for post-traumatic stress. They don't have post-traumatic stress disorder, but they have some baggage. But the numbers who have true blue 100% post-traumatic stress disorder are really relatively small and pretty close to what the British and the Canadians and the Dutch are seeing. So we shouldn't create this expectation there will be more. But there is no doubt that what Ukraine is facing with steady artillery barrages and inescapable combat can be something significantly different from those other nations that we mentioned and what they may be facing. But I think we've got to realize the research would tell us, without a doubt, the vast majority of our veterans did not commit suicide. The vast majority did not get PTSD. They have post-traumatic growth. And a lot of research has been done in recent years on post-traumatic growth. And when we treat PTSD and then come out the other end, they have post-traumatic growth. In America, we call that World War II generation the greatest generation. And they really were the greatest generation. There was a small percentage that had a lot of baggage, but the vast majority had post-traumatic stress growth. Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill us only makes us what? And Nietzsche stole that from the Bible. 2,000 years before Nietzsche, Romans chapter 5, we glory in tribulation. For tribulation work of patience, patience experience hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. Almost 2,000 years before Nietzsche, the Bible said the same thing. The idea of post-traumatic growth, the idea of being stronger from the bad things in life is not a new idea. And the pity party, the expectation that problems will happen, can be a new idea. So it's a balancing act. On the one hand, we got to avoid this expectation that could become a reality. But on the other hand, if there is a problem, deal with it. How can you help other people if you can't help yourself? So does that kind of provide a foundation for understanding? Thank you, sir. And you had a question, sir.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Dave, that you invited us to your presentations. Your speech was very interesting. Thank you. But I have questions to you, Dave. You know that now in Ukraine is enlisted to the army, and how you know it's very dramatic because they are to go even disabled people and disabled psychology people even. And for me, very interesting your opinion. what will in the future in Ukraine? No, for example, we can imagine that will a negotiation between Ukraine, Russians, and will peace. And those people, I mean, a soldier who now is fighting with Russians soldiers, they come to back in their houses and society. For me, very interesting your opinion. What will situations? I mean, it could be a lot of criminal. I mean, because there are a lot of PTSD and something symptoms, and this is war. It's another war, and
Yeah.
it's very scary war.
Yeah.
Scary war. And for me, very interesting opinion. Thank you so much.
You bet. There are aspects of that question I can't address, but there is one important angle on that. The returning veteran throughout history has been far less likely to commit a violent criminal act than a non-veteran. Every warrior society has faced the same dilemma. We take our young men, we teach them how to kill, we give them tools to kill people, we send them to distant lands, we give them years of practice at killing people, and we bring them home. What's to stop them from using their skills on their own people? And every society that survived has found the same solution: discipline, discipline, discipline. Every warrior society had distinctive haircuts and distinctive uniforms. It's been fun when the war began to watch my Rangers. The Rangers, the Army Rangers, are all carved out of the same cookie cutter, the exact same haircut. And then in the war, they told the Rangers, grow your hair out, grow a beard, Roger out. Now cut it off, Roger out. Now grow it out, Roger out. Cut it off. We don't care what our hair looks like some fashion model. What matters is submission to authority. And whatever that standard is, we enforce that. Now, in US and British and Canadian forces, the guardian of the safeguard is the NCO, the sergeants. And that's one of their great functions. It is to enforce the standards, whatever they are. And that is the safeguard. But all of the data would tell us the concern that a returning veteran is more likely to commit violent crime is actually, I don't think there's a good foundation for that. If they have what they need to function in a normal life, they really are not significantly more, they're much less likely to commit violent crime. So the idea that people coming home with PTSD represents a danger, there is a danger to themselves. There's suicide and other things. But the number of veterans who've committed terrible mass murders in 23 years of war, extraordinarily small, and really represent a totally different aspect I don't want to get into right now. But that's the only answer I could give you. That every society after the war has to face these kind of dilemmas. And I think given what Ukraine has accomplished so far, we can be confident that they will do that well. And we can trust that they will do that well. I hope that helps. Yes. Other questions back here in the corner, sir?
Thank you for your presentation. But could you highlight some problems you think there are with how Ukraine deals with post-traumatic stress-related issues?
I do not know anything at all about how Ukraine is dealing with it. I can't speak to that. But I can tell you that they have listened and very positive and talked about bringing me back out here. They were some of the smartest and best people on the planet. They're dedicated to doing the best they can, and they're learning. And the truth is that about this point in the war, in many ways, NATO and America may have more to learn from Ukraine than they do from us. So there will be that exchange of information, and they will grow. I have had the honor to talk to the colonel who is the head of psychological services for the nation of Ukraine, and the people working with him earlier today. And they are brilliant, motivated, magnificent individuals who are dedicated to seeing the proper psychological services for the Ukrainian armed forces. That's the only thing I do know. I've met them, and they're good people, and they're doing a good job, and they want to learn how to do it better. Does that answer your question? All right. Let's take just one more question if we have time.
So you choose.
All right, we'll make three real quick.
Okay.
Two. All right.
Here.
All right. We got here. I'll give you my mic here. You go rock with that.
Mr. Grossman, thank you so much for your interesting presentation. You have mentioned that the reasons for sleep deprivation are video games and movies, etc. Recently in Ukrainian society, it was discussed that many Ukrainian soldiers suffer from addiction to online gambling. Is it also a cause in American Army, and how to tackle that?
What a great question. Online gambling. I've never run into that. There's got to be some of it going on in the U.S. Armed Forces. If we start looking for it, we might find it. But I have not seen it being a significant problem. And it can have a dynamic, but the dynamics of the video game is never ending, never ceasing, total immersion. The dynamics of gambling is that you fairly quickly run out of money, and it becomes almost a self-solution. It's not something that just off the top of my head I could see people spending every free moment of every day doing, but it might be, and it's worthy of future examination. I just don't know any more about that. It's a great topic to start looking for. Thank you. Sir, we'll get you, and then we'll get the one in the back.
Many thanks. And my question again about sleep deprivation. Wanted to know what about the case of not going to sleep because being afraid of a really bad dream, not just a bad dream, but the bad dream that will ruin the day, even worse than sleep deprivation itself.
Yes. What a great question. Nightmares, bad dreams that are debilitating. Nightmares are one of the symptoms of PTSD. And again, we're really, really good at treating PTSD. We get better all the time. And so if they are persistent, I would tell you that individual really needs to seek help. And the docs can help. And we come to terms with the trauma, and they come to terms with what the midbrain is dealing with, and the other dynamics that are going on. It's again, you know, if this is causing a significant problem in your life, whatever it is, if it causes clinically significant distress or impairment in some aspect of your life, then that is the critical component in post-traumatic stress disorder. And we can help. And we need to create an environment which is okay to get that help. And go with the expectation that you will get that help and you will come out the other end stronger. This is the path to post-traumatic growth. We confront the problem, we defeat the problem, and we're stronger when we come out the other end. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yeah. And so the idea is that the video game is an escape from the nightmares. And the movies are an escape from the nightmares. I would tell you it is a dysfunctional and pathological escape. That the solution is far more harmful than what you're trying to avoid. Nightmares are very common. It's part of life. It's part of combat. And these video games are like a drug that allows us to escape our dreams, but they're making us escape our sleep. And I would tell you that if the games are to avoid nightmares, then at one level that's a justification, a rationalization. At another level, it is dysfunctional and deeply harmful, and it really needs to be confronted. It's like going without food. It's like being anorexic. It is destructive, and it needs to be confronted. I hope that answers the question. All right, we had one more question in the back there. Oh, we'll get them both. Let's do them both there. We'll be good.
Okay, Mr. Grossman, thank you very much for your presentation. My question is going to be probably about practical guidelines. Let's imagine a situation, you're an NCO, a surgeon, or like an officer in reserve, but back to the front line, and you are facing, well, freshmen, freshly enlisted people. What would you recommend in the context of moral support to talk with them about, what to prepare them for, and all of that? Because right now the combat training is constantly improving, and I think that the moral support part of the training is yet to be improved in Ukraine. Thank you.
I'm a soldier, an Army Ranger, and it hurts me to admit that the Marine Corps is doing some really good things. But the United States Marine Corps has a required reading list. And both of these books have been on the Commandant's required reading list for over 20 years. And they represent one possible solution right now. It's in front of you. The other end of the solution would be what I just told you. You know, like I said, I was a young paratrooper, 1974, 82nd Airborne Division. And we wanted to know what combat would be like. And we had Vietnam veterans all around us, and they wouldn't talk. They wouldn't tell us. It was like some taboo topic. It's like somebody coming up and asking about your sex life. But fast forward another 10 years, Captain Grossman, Army Ranger, en route to teach at West Point. I'm asking these questions, and we're getting the answers. And early drafts of my book on killing were floating around the Vietnam veterans community. And the veteran's wife would read the book, the early draft of the book, and say, was it like that for you? And I'd say, well, let me read the dang book. And for the first time, they're talking about it. So I would tell you that taboo is gone, that we can talk about these things now. And you can talk about what happened to you. I'll tell you an example of one taboo. In World War II research, among the veterans of intense combat, about half would talk about wetting themselves, loss of bladder control. About 1 out of 5, about 20% of the veterans in intense combat would talk about messing themselves, loss of control of the bowels. I had the honor to sit down. I trained a Canadian regiment. It was about 12, 15 years into their war. I sat down over some beers with some senior Canadian sergeants, and every one of them were willing to admit that one time or another, between bad food and stress diarrhea, every one of them had messed themselves. And they were willing to talk about it, admit it. I told one World War II veteran about the research that 20% would admit they messed themselves. He said, hell, all that proves is 80% were what? Liars. That's what he said. Not for us to call them liars. Go with 20%. But if it happened to them, it could happen to us. And under stress, the body redirects energy. And inside every human body is a toxic waste site. It's the colon, the large intestines, about 6 feet long, and it's full of toxic waste. And if you nick that thing, it will leak out and infect the wound. And prior to modern medication, you're dead. A slow, hideous, horrible death. It's very reasonable for the body to dump that toxic waste before a life and death event. So I do grand rounds in hospitals quite a bit. I did Department of Defense wide psychiatric grand rounds But whenever I get a chance to talk to my emergency room, my ER personnel, I ask them what ratio of traffic accident victims have messed themselves. And the numbers are very, very high. It's very common. And people are devastated by it. Lifelong, humiliated, shattered, devastated. The last time it happened, you were 3 years old. Do you understand? And a little bit of psychological first aid goes a long way. You tell them that's your body's natural response. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. And tell my medical personnel, you can literally save somebody from a lifetime of shame and despair by simply saying that's your body's natural response. It happens all the time. So what I'm saying is, I think through the books and through the experience that we've evolved to a level when we talk about these things. And I tell you, the young men and women coming in, they want to know. And they want you to share these things with them. And if you had auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, slow motion time, if you had memory gaps or memory distortions, it's really, really effective to share that with them and to talk about those things that those Vietnam veterans wouldn't tell us. I think it represents a major evolutionary step further that we're able to talk about these things, and they want to hear. So at one level, you can read the book, but the other level, there's great value in telling them what it's going to be like, what happened to you and what happened to Jones and what happened to Smith, and helping them understand that these are the body's natural responses to these processes. Does that make sense? I have one last question over here.
Дякую. Перш за все хочу подякувати Американському дому за прекрасний сервіс технологічний. Що зламалося?
Скажіть щось. 1-2, 1-2. Скажіть слово. 1-2. Чек. Перевіряємо.
Дякую.
Yes, very good.
В першу чергу хочу подякувати за технологічний і організаційний сервіс Американському дому. Після попереднього заходу відчувається різниця. І готуючи візит пана Гросмана в Україну, спілкуючись з посадовими особами міністерства певного, значить, і Збройних сил, а також фахівцями, були не тільки певні побажання, але були певні застереження, які озвучувалися. І нарешті мені вдалося їх сформулювати, зібрати всі докупи в один такий от якби приклад. Свого часу, на початку 90-х років, посольство США організувало спеціальну космічну операцію. Це телеміст Україна-США по проблемах соціальної адаптації військовослужбовців. І я мав честь бути його учасником того телемосту. І я тоді зрозумів, що список проблем американської армії і список проблем української армії на той час ніяким чином не пересікалися взагалі. Тобто дві студії, це фантастично дорогий проект був, бо були задіяні купа спутників, щоб ця комунікація відбулася. Дві студії абсолютно не розуміли одне одного, про що говорять. І мені захотілося отримати в результаті вашого візиту списки проблем американської армії і списки проблем української армії фахові, для того, щоб їх порівняти. І потім ще раз провести дискусію після цього аналізу. Бо на сьогоднішній момент, я думаю, що після вашого візиту залишиться дуже багато білих плям, недомовок, бо ви не знаєте, ми не знаємо, і досвід не передається, а набувається. От як так зробити, щоб цей процес продовжився? Дякую.
Well, excellent question. Where do we go from here? Number one, many thanks to this institution and the embassies who's made this possible. Many thanks to you, sir, for the use of your facility and giving us the opportunity to present it at that time. I hope that we can continue this process in the years to come. I think my books are something we can run with. If I can ever be of service in the future, I will do my best to be back here again if you need me. But I would tell you, you had a brilliant idea to get the people together and to talk about these things. It's interesting that from the electronic environment, there was this technological environment. There was such small level of interlap. It's almost none. But I would tell you from this perspective, I think, given the reception that we've had so far, that we have very, very great overlap in this specific area. And we're not talking about electronics, hardware. We're not talking about software. We're talking about the human experience. And it is largely universal. And I think there's great value in taking it that next step. And I thank you for asking the question. And I hope that the opportunity will arise for us to do that. As a minimum, I'm being videotaped here. We videotaped in others. I give everybody, whoever videotapes me, all the permission they need to use it for whatever you want to do. The attack on police and law enforcement in America has been pretty severe, and I've borne the brunt of some of those attacks. And my only defense is somebody saying, wow, let's look at this guy Grossman, see what he really says. And then they look at all these videos and they find out what's going on, and then they read my books and I win. And it's by having all that information out there that I win. So please use anything here and any of these presentations I've done in any way that can be a service to you. Here we have the wonderful translators who already simultaneously translated it. And if any of this can be a service in any way, it would be my great honor. Let me tie this up, if I may, and then we'll hang around. Waiting at home for me is my bride of 49 years. She was my high school sweetheart. She was 15. I had just turned 17 when I proposed to her. We are from Arkansas. Yeah. 2 years later, she married 2 years later. She married a crazy Army paratrooper. Been this ride with me for 49 years. I love her more than life itself. But after 24 years in the Army and 26 years doing this, on the road, just a couple hundred days a year, I get home a couple of nights a week and spend a night in bed with my wife and then clean underwear, back on the road. We believe if we love our children, if we love our grandchildren, if we love our nation, if we love our God, if we love liberty and freedom, that we will do everything we can to assist. I'm 67 years old, and it's my prayer that I can do this for another 20 years. And my wonderful bride of 49 years stands behind me. She said, that's what we were placed on this earth to do. So on behalf of my bride who waits at home for me, on the behalf of myself, I thank you for the honor to be of service, of some small service, to the magnificent men and women of Ukraine in this hour. And it's been one of the great privileges of my life to be here and to be able to do this. Thank you, and Slava Ukraine.
Ой, перепрошую.